Rear Admiral Ethan Cole was walking to meet the child he'd waited a decade to hold when a nurse punched him so hard the roses exploded across the hospital floor. Sounds insane, right? Here's the question that should scare you more than the punch. What if the most polite moment in America, a simple handshake, could be a death sentence? Picture the maternity wing at Harborview Medical Center in San Diego. Fluorescent lights. Quiet prayers behind closed doors. A man gripping flowers like they're a promise he can't break. Then a hospital executive steps in with a warm smile, a clipboard, and a hand extended. This isn't just a story about 8 seconds of violence. It's about hidden threats, buried training, and the kind of courage that looks wrong until it saves everything. Stay with me to the end, then hit like and comment where you're watching from. A punch is loud, it makes strangers gasp and security run. But the quiet before it is where a life gets decided, where a man thinks he is finally arriving at the moment he owes his family, and a woman in a hospital gown counts her breaths like they are the only thing holding her steady. Late afternoon settled over Naval Base San Diego with that dry coastal haze that turns the sky pale and the buildings flat. The briefing room smelled like burnt coffee and printer toner. A map of the Pacific glowed on the wall display, blue and clean, as if war was something you could zoom in and out of with 2 fingers. Rear Admiral Ethan Cole sat at the head of the table, shoulders square, uniform pressed hard enough to look like armor. He had the posture of a man trained to keep his pulse hidden, trained to make decisions with people watching, trained to carry pressure without letting it leak onto his face. The officers around him talked in that clipped rhythm the Navy teaches you. Words that sounded like order and certainty, rotations, readiness, port calls, maintenance windows. Ethan nodded at the right times. He answered when someone addressed him. He corrected a date. He signed a form without looking at it because his hand already knew the motion. But his focus kept drifting to the rectangle of his phone on the table, face down, silent the way he kept it whenever he was supposed to be fully present. His aide, Lieutenant Harper, noticed. Harper was young, competent, the kind of officer who could sense a shift in a room without being told. He slid another folder toward Ethan. "Sir, we need your sign-off on the next quarter's movement schedule." Ethan placed his pen on the signature line and paused. He could feel the hum of the air conditioner, the quiet click of a projector fan. Somewhere outside, a gull cried like it was laughing at something. "Send it to my executive officer," Ethan said. Harper blinked. "Sir." Ethan did not look away from the phone. "Commander Ruiz can handle it. I'll review later." One of the captains across the table leaned forward, eyebrows raised. "Admiral, with respect, the timing on this is tight." Ethan's jaw tightened. "So is my life." That landed in the room like a dropped wrench. The table went still. A few men traded glances and tried to pretend they were not curious. In the Navy, personal life was something you carried like contraband. You did not show it unless it was already bleeding through your uniform. Ethan's phone vibrated once, soft, almost polite. The kind of buzz that could be nothing until it was everything. He flipped it over. "Sarah." His thumb hovered above the screen for a half-second like he needed permission from himself. Then he stood so fast, the chair legs scraped the floor. "Excuse me," he said, already moving. He stepped into the hallway outside the briefing room where the air smelled faintly of salt and floor wax. He pressed play. Sarah's voice came through with a tremor she tried to hide and could not. Behind her words there were other sounds. A hospital intercom. Footsteps. A distant murmur of nurses giving instructions like they were reading from a script they had memorized 1,000 times. "Ethan," she said and swallowed. "They're admitting me. My contractions are close. The doctor says it's time." He closed his eyes and, for a moment, the base disappeared. The fluorescent lights, the uniform, the weight of command. All of it slid off him, and what remained was a man hearing the person he loved most, trying not to sound afraid. "I need you here," Sarah continued. "Please, please don't let this be another thing you miss." The message ended with a quiet exhale, the kind that comes when you have said what you hate that you have to say. Ethan stared at the phone screen as if he could press it again and make the world rewind. His throat tightened until it hurt. He was 50 years old, a man who had stood on steel decks in rough seas and watched storms build across open water, a man who had given orders that sent others into danger, a man who had learned to keep his face calm when alarms screamed. And yet his hands shook. He looked back toward the briefing room door. Through the glass panel, he could see the officers sitting there waiting for him to return and continue talking about schedules and assets and contingencies. Ethan turned away. He walked back into the room, and the moment he crossed the threshold, the conversation died. Faces lifted. Eyes tracked him. "Gentlemen," Ethan said, voice steady but thinner than usual, like he was stretching it tight to keep it from breaking. "My wife is in labor. I'm leaving." A captain cleared his throat. "Sir Protocol." Ethan fixed him with a look that was not anger, not exactly. It was something older. Exhaustion, regret. A decision he had delayed for decades and could not delay anymore. "Protocol can find someone else," he said. Lieutenant Harper took a step forward, unsure whether to block him or assist. Ethan did not slow. He was already unbuttoning the top of his uniform jacket as he walked, like he could not breathe properly inside it. "Harper," Ethan said without turning. "Tell Ruiz he has the deck." "Yes, sir," Harper replied, voice reflexive. Ethan moved through the corridor, through the building, past salutes and startled glances. Outside, the sun hit him in a warm sheet. He inhaled, and for a fraction of a second, he tasted freedom. Then he was at his car keys in hand, doors unlocking with a soft chirp, his body moving faster than his mind could catch up. As he drove out of the base, the guard at the gate raised the barrier with a cautious look, as if he could sense that something important was happening and did not want to be the one who slowed it down. Ethan nodded once and pressed the accelerator. San Diego traffic swallowed him almost immediately. Cars crawled brake lights, flickering like a field of red warning signals. Ethan gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles blanched. He kept checking the time on the dashboard. He kept checking his phone at red lights as if it might have changed without his permission. A memory flashed, sharp as a snapped wire. Sarah, standing in their kitchen years ago, her hair pulled back, her face pale. She held a pregnancy test like it was something fragile. Her eyes were bright, not with joy yet, but with the fear of hoping too hard. Ethan had walked in wearing his uniform, smelling like the ship, his mind still half at work. She had looked up at him and smiled a smile that shook. "It's positive," she whispered. For a moment, Ethan had been speechless, not the controlled silence he used in command. Something raw. He had crossed the room, taken the test from her hand, stared at it as if it might vanish if he blinked. Then the fear in her eyes had returned, and he had seen it clearly. The quiet question she never said out loud. Will this be another thing I do alone? Because they had done so much alone. They had spent 10 years chasing this. 10 years of calendars and appointments and white-walled clinics that smelled like disinfectant and hope. 10 years of early morning blood draws Sarah's veins bruised blue and yellow. 10 years of Ethan leaving for deployments and returning with gifts, thinking gifts could replace time. 10 years of Sarah learning to swallow disappointment with a practiced smile when well-meaning people asked why they did not have children yet. They had tried the natural way until it became a joke that hurt too much to laugh at. They had tried treatments with names that sounded like machines. They had sat in waiting rooms with other couples who avoided eye contact as if grief was contagious. 3 times Sarah had been pregnant. 3 times she had lost it. The first miscarriage happened while Ethan was in the middle of an operation briefing overseas. The satellite phone connection had crackled. Sarah's voice had sounded distant, like she was speaking from the bottom of a pool. "It's gone," she said. Ethan had stood in a hallway of a foreign base with his palm pressed against a concrete wall, trying to keep his breathing quiet so no one would hear him fall apart. The second time he had been home, and he had watched her crumple on the bathroom tile, One hand braced against the sink. There had been blood. There had been the hollow look in her eyes that frightened him more than tears. The third time, Sarah did not cry at all. She lay in bed for hours with her face turned toward the wall, and Ethan sat beside her feeling useless, feeling like a man trained for everything except this. After that, they stopped talking about it for a while. Not because they did not want it, but because wanting felt like setting yourself on fire. Sarah was 41 now. Ethan was 50. They had started to talk about acceptance, that careful word people use when they are trying to be brave. They had spoken about travel, about quiet mornings, about building a life that did not revolve around an absence. Then, 6 months ago, Sarah had walked into the kitchen holding a test again, her hand shaking. Ethan had looked at her and seen both terror and something else. A stubborn spark. "It can't be," she said, like she was trying to argue with reality. Ethan had taken the test and stared at it until his eyes blurred. Then he had grabbed Sarah, hugged her too tight, and felt her body tremble against him. This time, he had promised her something out loud. Not a vague reassurance. Not the kind of promise that left room for duty to cut in. "I'm going to be there," he said, voice fierce. "I'm going to be there when she arrives. No mission, no meeting, no excuse." Sarah had pulled back just enough to look at him. There had been love in her eyes and years of damage. She touched his cheek as if checking whether he was real. "You say that like you can control it," she whispered. Ethan had swallowed. "I can control me." That night he had submitted paperwork that felt like confession. Leave requests, delegations, contingency plans. He had told his executive officer, Commander Ruiz, to keep him honest. He had asked Harper to keep his calendar clear. He had done everything he could to build a wall around the date as if fate needed paperwork. Now, trapped behind a line of cars, Ethan felt that wall strain. He glanced at the dashboard clock again. He imagined Sarah in a hospital gown, alone in a bright room, while strangers watched her body do something terrifying. He imagined her looking toward the door every time it opened. He punched the steering wheel once hard enough to sting. Not from anger, from fear. When the traffic finally loosened, Ethan took the next exit and cut through side streets. The city blurred, storefronts, palm trees, sunset lights sliding between buildings. He drove with the focus of a man threading a ship through narrow water. At a stoplight, his phone rang. He answered on the first vibration. Sarah. Her breath came in uneven bursts. "Where are you?" 10 minutes, Ethan said, though he did not know if it was true. He made it true by pressing the gas. "I hate this," Sarah whispered. "I know," Ethan said. "I'm coming." "You promised me," she said, and he heard the years behind it. All the times she had sat alone with a plate of food going cold. All the times she had smiled at other people's children and gone home to an empty room. Ethan's throat tightened again. "I'm keeping it." The call ended abruptly, not because she hung up, but because a nurse spoke to her and she had to respond. Ethan stared at the road, heart pounding, and in his mind he saw a door closing between them, and he forced himself to drive faster. He passed a small flower shop on a corner, lights dimming as the owner flipped the sign toward closed. Ethan hit his brakes so hard the car dipped. He parked half in the wrong place and ran inside. The shop smelled like wet stems and soil. The owner, an older man with tired eyes, looked up in surprise. "We're closing," the man said. Ethan reached into his wallet and pulled out cash without counting it. "I need flowers," he said. The owner's gaze shifted to Ethan's uniform, the rank, the urgency in his face. He did not argue. He pointed toward a bucket of roses, pale pink and white, the last ones left. Ethan grabbed them like he was grabbing time. He did not ask for wrapping. He did not care if petals fell. The owner handed him a rubber band and a paper sleeve, hands moving quickly. "You're late for something important," the man said, not a question. Ethan nodded once. "Yes." "Go," the owner replied, and his voice softened. "Go now." Ethan ran back to the car bouquet, clutched tight. He placed it carefully on the passenger seat, then glanced at it like it was proof that he was trying. He started driving again, and as the hospital came into view, a pale building rising above palm trees, he felt something shift in his chest. Hope sharp enough to hurt. Harborview Medical Center sat near the bay glass and concrete, the kind of place designed to look calm from the outside. The parking structure was packed. Ethan found a spot and slid into it with a fast, clean motion he used when docking boats. He grabbed the roses, shut the door, and started running. Inside, the air changed immediately. Cooler, sterile, the scent of sanitizer and soap. The floor gleamed. People moved with purpose, some pushing wheelchairs, some carrying clipboards, some holding coffee like a lifeline. The lobby was filled with small dramas that meant everything to the people living them. A father bouncing a baby on his knee, an older woman clutching a purse with both hands, eyes wide. A man arguing quietly on the phone, voice strained. Ethan approached the front desk. The receptionist looked up, saw his uniform, then saw his face. Her expression softened. "Maternity," Ethan said. "4th floor," she replied, pointing. "Elevators to your left." Ethan nodded, already moving. He glanced at his phone. No new messages. His heart hammered anyway. At the elevators, a family stepped out slowly, taking up the doorway. Ethan forced himself to slow, to not shove past them like a man rushing a battlefield. He told himself this was a hospital. This was where people came for help. This was where you did not bring your war into the hallway. He stepped into the elevator when the doors opened and pressed the button for 4. The elevator hummed as it rose. He stared at his reflection in the mirrored panel. The uniform made him look solid, commanding, ready. But his eyes looked like a man praying. He thought of Sarah again. Their bedroom at home. Her side of the closet full of soft colors. His side rigid with uniforms. He remembered her sitting on the edge of the bed last month, rubbing her stomach slowly, eyes closed. "She's moving," Sarah had whispered. Ethan had sat beside her, hesitant, like he was afraid to touch and break the moment. Sarah had taken his hand and placed it on her belly. There. A small kick, firm and unmistakable. Life insisting on itself. Ethan had laughed, a short sound that surprised him, and then he had cried once, quick and embarrassed. Sarah had smiled through her own tears and leaned her head against his shoulder. "What do you want to name her?" Ethan asked. Sarah had answered without hesitation. "Lily." "Why Lily?" "Because lilies survive," Sarah said. "They bloom after winter." Ethan repeated it now in his head as the elevator climbed. Lily, Lily Grace Cole. Grace, because he did not know what else to call something that arrived after so much loss. The elevator chimed. The doors opened on the 4th floor, and the smell changed again. A warmer air, less sterile, layered with the faint scent of baby soap and cafeteria coffee. The hallway signs pointed toward labor and delivery. Ethan stepped out and started walking fast, then caught himself and forced it to a brisk stride. Nurses moved in and out of rooms. One pushed a cart of supplies, her face focused. Another stood at a workstation, typing with quick fingers. A man in scrubs spoke quietly to a couple seated in a waiting area, their hands entwined, their eyes fixed on his mouth like it held their fate. Ethan passed a window looking into the nursery. He saw tiny blankets, folded bassinets lined up the room, prepared for beginnings. His throat tightened again. His phone buzzed. A text from Sarah. "Where are you?" Ethan typed back as he walked. "On the floor. Coming." He reached the maternity wing corridor, and the soundscape shifted. More beeping, softer voices, the occasional sharp cry that cut through everything and then faded. Ethan stopped, once hand braced against the wall, and took a breath to steady himself. He did not want to walk into Sarah's room looking like he had sprinted through a storm. He wanted to be her calm. He tried to picture her face when he entered. The relief, the anger she might hide, the way she might grip his hand like she was afraid he would vanish. A nurse at the station looked up. "Can I help you?" "My wife," Ethan said. "Sarah Cole. She's in labor." The nurse glanced at the screen, then smiled. "Room 12, down the hall, second door on the right." Ethan nodded and started down the corridor. The roses felt heavy in his hand now, not from weight but from meaning. He passed a vending machine with a broken light. A bulletin board with pastel flyers about breastfeeding classes, a cleaning cart parked neatly against the wall. Ordinary details that made the place feel real, not cinematic, not mythic. Just a hospital doing what hospitals do. He thought about all the times he had rehearsed this moment in his head. Walking into the room, kissing Sarah's forehead, telling her he was proud of her, meeting his daughter. He imagined himself holding a tiny body and feeling that strange shift men describe when life stops being about them. He almost laughed at the irony that he had planned military operations with less intensity than he had planned this. At the far end of the hallway, a set of double doors opened and closed as staff moved through. Ethan could see a sign with bold letters, "Labor and delivery authorized personnel only." For a moment he slowed, not from fear of the hospital, from fear of what he had to face in Sarah's eyes. He had missed so much. He had missed Sarah's father's funeral because the ship could not be delayed. He had missed the last Thanksgiving with her mother before the cancer took her because there was an exercise he was told was critical. He had called from hotel rooms and tarmacs and ship decks, always promising he would make it up to her, always believing there would be time. Sarah had stopped yelling years ago. She had become quieter. Her disappointment had turned into a kind of careful politeness that was worse than anger. Ethan had learned to dread that calm because it meant she was protecting herself from expecting anything. Tonight felt like his last chance to change the story they had been living. He lifted the roses slightly, straightened his shoulders, and kept walking. His footsteps were quieter on the polished floor than he expected. He could hear his own breathing. A door down the hall opened. A woman in a hospital gown leaned out, eyes wide, hair damp with sweat. A nurse stood beside her, speaking gently. The woman's partner hovered behind, helpless, trying to smile. Ethan's chest ached with empathy. He was not a spectator here. He was one of them. Just another person trying to get to someone he loved while the world spun too fast. He reached the turn that led toward Sarah's room. The hallway was brighter here. The air carried a stronger scent of sanitizer. A wall clock ticked above a framed poster about hand washing. Ethan paused at the corner and looked down at his bouquet. A few petals had bruised. The stems were damp. He adjusted the paper sleeve and tried to make it neat. He was a man who could line up ships and schedules and logistics, and yet he could not make a handful of flowers look perfect. He smiled anyway, because Sarah did not need perfect. She needed him. Ethan lifted his phone and called her again as he walked. She answered on the second ring. "I'm here," he said. Sarah exhaled, and the sound was half relief, half pain. "Don't get lost." "I'm not," Ethan replied. "Tell me what you need." "I need you to walk in," Sarah said. "I need to see you." Ethan swallowed. "I'm coming." He ended the call and slipped the phone into his pocket. His palm brushed the inside of his jacket where he kept a folded piece of paper. A small note Sarah had written months ago after a doctor appointment. She had tucked it into his uniform before he left for a short trip. He had found it later in a quiet moment and read it over and over. It said, "Come back to me. Come back to us." Ethan's eyes stung. He blinked hard and kept moving. At the nurse's station ahead, someone laughed softly, then quickly stopped, as if laughter felt too loud in a place where life and pain lived side by side. A monitor beeped in a steady rhythm. Another beeped faster, then slowed. Ethan passed a doorway where a doctor spoke low to a nurse, their faces serious. He caught words like blood pressure and dilation and anesthesia. He did not stop. He did not ask. He told himself Sarah's team was competent. He told himself she was safe. He told himself the only thing he had to do was arrive. He turned another corner closer now, and the corridor opened into a longer stretch of hallway that led toward the heart of the maternity wing. The lighting here was bright enough to wash color out of skin. The floor shone. The world felt clean and controlled, like it could keep chaos out if it stayed sterile enough. Ethan looked down the hall and saw doors, signs, a few staff moving briskly. He adjusted his grip on the roses and exhaled slowly, trying to calm the pounding in his chest. Somewhere behind one of those doors, Sarah was waiting, body working harder than he could imagine, courage being demanded from her, with no way to opt out. Ethan felt the weight of that, and he felt the urgency sharpen. He started forward again, footsteps, steady eyes, fixed down the hallway, mind holding one thought like a compass. Do not be late. 5 floors above him, the light in an executive office remained on. 5 floors above him, the light in an executive office remained on. Dr. Victor Langford stood at his window and watched the city soften into evening. From up here, San Diego looked calm, almost innocent. Traffic moved like a quiet river. The bay reflected the last smear of daylight. People down on the sidewalks carried grocery bags and held hands and argued about dinner, unaware of how thin the line was between ordinary and catastrophic. Langford's office smelled like polished wood and expensive cologne, the kind of scent that suggested control. Behind him, framed photographs lined the wall. Langford shaking hands with donors at a gala. Langford smiling beside a senator. Langford, in scrubs, arms folded, posed in front of a new wing with a ribbon cut in half. A man trusted with lives. A man who signed checks for pediatric equipment and spoke at charity breakfasts about compassion. On his desk sat a leather portfolio open to a single sheet of paper. A schedule printed in clean type. Times, locations, names. The most important name sat near the middle of the page, circled once not with ink but with attention. Ethan Cole. Langford reached into his desk drawer and removed a small plain container. No label, no warning symbol, nothing that would invite curiosity if someone glanced at it for half a second. He set it down on the desk, then washed his hands at the sink in the corner of the office the way a surgeon might before a procedure. He dried them carefully, rubbing each finger until the skin felt almost too clean. Then he opened the container. The gel inside was clear and glossy, catching the light as he tilted it. Langford dipped a cotton swab into the substance and drew it across the center of his right palm in one slow stroke. He did not rush. He did not hesitate. He watched the gel spread like a thin film of glass across his skin. It left no color, no shine unless the light hit it just right. His heart rate remained steady. His breath remained controlled. He flexed his fingers once, feeling the faint tackiness as the gel settled. Then he turned to the mirror mounted beside the bookshelf and studied his own face. He practiced the expression he used when comforting anxious families in the waiting room. Soft eyes, slight smile, warmness without intimacy, the face of a man who belonged in hospitals. "Admiral," he murmured, testing the word like a blade. "Congratulations." His phone vibrated on the desk. A single text message. ADM Cole entered parking structure. Langford stared at the message until the screen dimmed. Then he tapped a reply with the same calm precision. Copy. He set the phone down, adjusted his tie, and slipped his executive badge into the top pocket of his suit jacket. The badge was unnecessary. Everyone in the building knew who he was. But the badge made him look official, and official always moved through spaces with less resistance. He walked to the door and paused, fingertips resting on the handle. For a moment, the office was very quiet. The air conditioner hummed. The city glowed beyond the glass. Langford's reflection in the window looked like 2 men layered together. One who built clinics. One who dismantled lives. He opened the door and stepped into the hall. The elevator ride down was smooth and silent. A young administrator stepped in on the 3rd floor and froze when she recognized him. "Dr. Langford," she said quickly, smoothing her blouse. "I did not realize you were still here." Langford gave her the same smile he gave the cameras at press conferences. "Big night," he said. "A lot of families in the building." "Yes, sir," she replied and glanced at his hands as if trying to read something in them. Then she looked away. People rarely looked too long at what might ask questions back. When the doors opened on the 4th floor, Langford stepped out into a corridor that smelled of sanitizer and baby soap. The maternity wing had a softness to it, a deliberate gentleness layered over the sterile backbone of hospital life. walls painted in muted colors, a bulletin board covered in pastel flyers, a framed photo of a newborn's toes that was supposed to make everyone remember why they were here. Langford walked past it all without slowing. He moved like he belonged in every hallway because he did. At the nurse's station, a clerk sat behind the counter typing quickly, eyes darting toward the corridor. Langford did not stop. He did not acknowledge the clerk with words. He simply passed close enough that the clerk could see his face and understand that their arrangement was still in place. The clerk's shoulders tensed, then relaxed. People who took money to do the wrong thing often told themselves it was small. Just a text, just information, nothing bloodstained. Langford continued down the hall until he reached a spot he had measured in his mind. Not marked, not special, just a place where he could step into the path of a man without looking like he had been waiting. He picked up a clipboard from a nearby counter. The paper on it was blank, but the prop mattered. Clipboard meant business. Clipboard meant harmless. Clipboard meant you could stand anywhere and no one would question it. Langford looked at his palm once, not with fear but with satisfaction, then lowered his hand and began to read the blank page as if it contained important notes. He had imagined this hallway for years, not this exact hallway at first. Years ago, he had imagined a courtroom. The memory came uninvited, sharp as a scent you cannot forget. 8 years earlier, Langford had sat in the back row of a federal courtroom in a suit he could barely afford, watching his older brother Ryan stand when the judge entered. Ryan's wrists were shackled. His hair was cut too short. His jaw worked like he was chewing on something bitter. Ryan looked nothing like the brother Langford grew up with. The brother who taught him to ride a bike. The brother who worked 2 jobs while Langford studied for medical school exams. The brother who had once told him with pride that Langford would be the one to lift their family name into something clean. In the courtroom, Ryan looked like a man who had already been sentenced by everyone's eyes. Across the aisle, Langford's mother sat, rigid hands clasped so tightly her fingers turned white. Her lipstick was too bright, like she had painted her face in armor. She stared forward and did not blink. The prosecutor spoke with practiced force, painting Ryan as a crucial piece of a criminal network. Not the mastermind, not the gunman, the one who made it all possible by moving money and equipment. Logistics, the prosecutor said, as if the word itself carried sin. He handled transfers. He arranged deliveries. He facilitated. Ryan's attorney argued that Ryan had been dragged into it by a cousin, that he had been stupid, that he had been trying to help family. The judge listened with a face that did not change. Then the judge read the sentence. 15 years. Langford's mother made a sound like her breath had been punched out of her. She gripped the bench. Langford leaned toward her, whispering, "Mom," but she did not respond. Her eyes remained fixed on Ryan, and then Langford saw him. Rear Admiral Ethan Cole was not famous in that courtroom, but he carried himself like a man used to being obeyed. He sat near the front with 2 men who looked like they belonged to him. Cole wore a civilian suit, but the way he held his shoulders gave him away. A military bearing that did not soften just because the uniform was off. Cole's face was composed. Not cruel, not triumphant, simply professional, as if this was a line item in a long day. Langford watched Cole stand when it was time to speak to a federal agent, shake hands with someone, and leave without looking back at the gallery. Cole did not glance at Ryan again. He did not glance at Langford's mother. He did not glance at Langford. Why would he? Ryan was a target. The case was closed. The operation was successful. The rest was debris. 2 weeks later, Langford's mother suffered a stroke in the kitchen. Langford found her slumped against the counter. Her mouth twisted, her eyes wide with confusion. He called an ambulance. He rode with her to the hospital and watched monitors blink and heard doctors use careful words. She survived, but she never fully returned to herself. The woman who had kept their family together became someone who needed help remembering what day it was. The family business collapsed after the news spread. Friends stopped calling. People who used to invite them to barbecues began crossing the street when they saw Langford in public. A last name can become a stain overnight. Langford did not burn hot with rage. Not at first. Rage was messy. Rage made people sloppy. Langford was a physician. He valued control. His anger hardened slowly cold and patient. A private promise made in the quiet hours after his mother fell asleep in her chair, and his phone stayed silent because Ryan was in a prison that did not allow calls whenever you needed them. Langford finished his medical training and moved into administration where power hid behind paperwork. He learned how hospitals worked from the inside. He learned how budgets could be shifted without leaving obvious fingerprints. He learned how security protocols were built to stop the obvious threats, not the subtle ones. He learned that everyone trusted a man with a badge and a calm smile. He tracked Ethan Cole the way some men track storms, promotions, posts, press releases. He learned Cole was stationed in San Diego. He learned Cole was married to Sarah. He learned their history in the way you learn facts that are none of your business, then convince yourself you are entitled to them. When he discovered Sarah's pregnancy, something in him clicked into final alignment. Not joy, not excitement. A kind of grim focus, as if the universe had provided the perfect moment, the moment that would wound the deepest. Langford had a way of telling himself stories that made his choices feel righteous. He did not call it murder, he called it balance. He called it repayment. Now he stood in the maternity corridor of Harborview Medical Center, holding a blank clipboard. His right palm coated with invisible death, and waited for Ethan Cole to arrive close enough for a gesture that would look like respect. Footsteps approached from the far end of the hallway. A nurse pushed a cart. A father paced near a waiting room rubbing his hands together. A doctor in scrubs walked past, eyes on a chart, too busy to notice the stillness in Langford's posture. Langford watched all of them like background noise. He checked his watch once. He did not need to. The timing had been rehearsed in his head 1,000 times. He knew how long it took a man to walk through the lobby, find the elevator, reach the 4th floor. He knew the points where a person might stop, ask for directions, lose a minute. He knew because he had built the corridor into a map of expectation. In another part of the same floor, Maya Hart moved through her shift with the kind of competence that made other nurses breathe easier. She was not loud about it. She did not announce herself. She simply did what needed doing. Hands steady, voice calm, eyes paying attention. A woman in room 9 was hyperventilating through contractions, eyes wide as if she might bolt from her own body. "I can't," the woman gasped. "I can't do this." Maya stepped beside the bed and placed a hand on the woman's shoulder, not heavy, just present. "Look at me," Maya said. The woman's eyes flicked to her. "Good," Maya continued. "In through your nose. Slow, like you're smelling something warm. Out through your mouth, like you're cooling a spoonful of soup." The woman blinked, then followed the rhythm. Maya mirrored her breathing, matching it until the panic softened at the edges. "That's it," Maya said. "You're not alone." The woman's partner stood near the wall, pale and helpless. Maya glanced at him. "Bring her some ice chips," Maya instructed. "One at a time. Tell her she's doing it right." The man nodded quickly, grateful to have a job. When Maya stepped out into the hall, a colleague caught her eye. "You're a magician," the colleague said. "How do you do that every time?" Maya's mouth lifted into a small smile. "Practice," she replied. She walked to the nurse's station and began organizing medication trays, aligning labels until everything faced the same direction. Order mattered in a place where bodies could unravel without warning. Maya liked clean lines, predictable patterns. She liked knowing where things were because when things went wrong, seconds mattered. She did not say that part out loud. A charge nurse approached, flipping through assignments. "Maya, you're covering rooms 12 through 15. Sarah Cole is in 12. Maya's eyes flicked to the name. The last name registered for an instant, then passed. Military families came through Harborview all the time. San Diego was full of them. People who held their fear quietly. People who smiled while their hands shook. "Got it," Maya said. As she turned to retrieve supplies, a scent drifted past her that did not belong in the maternity wing. It was faint, like a thread, metallic and sweet at the same time. It caught in the back of her throat. Maya paused, hand resting on the edge of the cart. She inhaled once more, slow and subtle. The smell vanished into the general hospital air. Soap, plastic, coffee, a trace of bleach. Maya blinked, then pushed the cart forward, telling herself it was nothing. Hospitals were full of smells. People tracked in chemicals on their shoes. Cleaning products mixed. 1,000 substances lived in the air at low levels. Her nose was sensitive. It always had been. That sensitivity had once been a job. Maya had not worn scrubs back then. She had worn tactical gear and a respirator slung at her side. She had stood in decontamination tents under floodlights, listening to radio chatter crackle through her headset. She had been the one people looked to when instruments gave unclear readings. Trust, Hart, team leader, had said once, half joking but not really. If she says we stop, we stop. It was a compliment that felt like a sentence. Maya could remember a warehouse on the outskirts of Berlin long before she ever stepped into Harborview. The team had approached the entrance with sensors that read clean. The air monitors showed nothing. Maya had stopped anyway, head tilting slightly, pupils widening. The scent had been thin but unmistakable, like a ghost. Sarin, she had said, voice flat, because fear would spread and they needed calm. Trace. Recent. The team leader had cursed and ordered an immediate evacuation. A specialized unit arrived in full protective suits. Later, after the threat was confirmed, her supervisor had gripped her shoulder hard enough to bruise. "You saved lives," he had said. "You are the best nose we have." Maya had forced a nod because she did not know how to accept praise for smelling death. What she remembered most was not the compliment. It was the quiet afterward, when she washed her hands and still felt the scent in her skin. The worst memory did not come from Berlin. It came from a children's ward in Eastern Europe, a place where the walls were painted with cartoon animals to distract from pain. Intelligence had warned of a poisoning. Maya's team arrived too late. The water supply had been contaminated hours before. Children were already vomiting, some were seizing, parents were screaming. Maya worked for 18 hours without sitting down. She identified the compound from the air near the sinks. She told doctors what antidotes might help, what protocols to follow, what to avoid. She watched staff move fast and still fall behind. A little girl with braids clung to Maya's sleeve, eyes glassy. "Am I going home?" the girl whispered. Maya knelt and took her hand. The child's skin was too hot, too dry. Maya forced her voice into softness. "You're safe," Maya said. "They're helping you." The girl smiled once faintly, like she believed her. Then the monitors began to scream. Nurses rushed in. Doctors pushed medication. Maya stood against the wall as the child's body fought, then gave up. The girl died in Maya's arms, light as a bundle of blankets. Maya held her while the room blurred, while the mother's wail cut through everything, while the smell of the toxin sat in the air like a stain. Afterward, Maya walked outside the hospital into cold night air and vomited behind an ambulance. She slid down the side of the vehicle and sat on the ground helmet in her lap, shaking. 2 weeks later, she resigned. Her supervisor stared at her paperwork as if it were a betrayal. "We can give you time off," he offered. "We can move you to analysis. Training, anything." Maya shook her head. "I can't keep arriving after it starts," she said. Her voice sounded older than her age. "I want to heal people, not chase what kills them." "You do heal," he argued. Maya looked at him. "Tell that to the mothers." She left the program and tried to build a life that did not revolve around invisible threats. Nursing had felt like a return to something human. Hands on shoulders, calm voices, warm blankets, a place where you could offer comfort and not just containment. For years it worked. Tonight, as Maya pushed her cart down the hallway toward room 12, she repeated that truth to herself. This is a hospital. This is where new life begins. This is not a place for what you used to be. She stopped at the supply closet, gathered gloves and sterile packs, and moved on. The corridor was busy but not chaotic. It had the steady hum of a place that knew its routine. At the nurse's station, the clerk who had been watching the hallway kept glancing up, nervous sweat shining at his hairline. Maya noticed the movement and filed it away. Staff got nervous for 100 reasons. Maybe he was new. Maybe he made a mistake on a chart. Maybe he had a family emergency and did not know how to say it. Maya walked past him, offering a polite nod. The clerk flinched as if she had caught him doing something wrong. "You okay?" Maya asked. The clerk forced a smile that did not fit his face. "Yes, ma'am, just busy." Maya held his gaze for half a second, then nodded and kept going. Her instincts stirred faintly. The same feeling she had ignored earlier when the strange scent brushed her throat, a mild tension at the base of her skull. She told herself it was stress. Night shifts did that. Births did that. Everyone carried a nervous energy in the maternity wing because everyone here was waiting for something. Maya reached room 12 and tapped lightly before entering. Sarah Cole lay on the bed. Hair damp face, pale eyes bright with pain and focus. Her hand gripped the rail so hard her knuckles whitened. A monitor beside her bed beeped steadily. The room smelled of antiseptic and warm skin. Sarah turned her head toward the door, hope flickering across her face, then fading when she saw it was not Ethan. "Hi, Sarah," Maya said gently, checking the chart at the foot of the bed. "I'm Maya. I'm with you tonight." Sarah nodded, swallowing. "Where is he?" Maya did not lie. She did not pretend. "He's in the building," she said. "He's coming up." Sarah closed her eyes and exhaled shakily. He said he would not miss this. Maya stepped closer and adjusted the blood pressure cuff. "He's close," she repeated, keeping her voice calm and factual, the kind of calm that could hold a room together. Sarah's eyes opened again, and for a moment Maya saw the years inside them. A woman who had learned to hope carefully. A woman who loved someone who belonged to a world that often came before her. Another contraction hit. Sarah's face tightened. Maya guided her breathing again, low and steady. "In through your nose," Maya said. "Out through your mouth. You're doing it." Sarah's grip tightened around Maya's fingers. "I'm scared," she whispered. Maya leaned in. "That makes sense," she replied. "You're still doing it." The contraction eased, leaving Sarah trembling. Maya checked her vitals, listened to the fetal monitor, and nodded. "Baby's heart rate is strong," Maya said. "Your body's working hard. You're working hard." Sarah swallowed and looked toward the door again. Maya stepped out after a few minutes to update the chart. In the hallway, the scent drifted again, faint but sharper this time, like someone had brought a cold coin close to her nose. Maya froze mid-step. She turned her head slightly, letting her breath move through her senses the way she had been trained. She could not name it yet. She only knew it did not belong. Down the hall, an elevator chimed. Footsteps began to approach with a quick, determined rhythm. Maya placed one hand on the medication cart and inhaled once carefully, as if she were listening with her whole body. The elevator chimed. Maya held still fingers resting on the metal edge of the cart and listened to the sound of hurried footsteps in the hallway the way she used to listen to radio chatter in a tent full of protective suits. The maternity wing had its own rhythm, soft and urgent at the same time. Shoes squeaked, wheels rolled. Voices stayed low as if volume could startle something fragile. Then the scent hit again, stronger now, and it did not drift like a cleaning product. It clung. It carried intent. Metallic, sweet, clinical. Wrong. Maya turned her head slightly and let her breathing slow. When she was younger, a trainer once told her that panic makes the world loud, but discipline makes it sharp. She felt that sharpness return, sliding over her senses like a blade being drawn from a sheath. Her eyes moved along the corridor, taking in every surface, every person, every hand. A man emerged from the elevator lobby, moving fast but controlled. He wore a suit that did not sit on him the way it did on civilians. His shoulders were too square. His gaze stayed forward. In his right hand he carried a bouquet of roses, pale pink and white, the paper sleeve bent from a rush. Rear Admiral Ethan Cole. Maya recognized his face from news clips and plaques in hospital halls. She also recognized the look in his eyes, the one she had seen on soldiers walking into field hospitals, on fathers in pediatric wards, on people who did not know whether they were arriving in time. Ethan's mouth curved into a smile as he passed a window into the nursery. It was a small smile, private, like he was saving it for a woman behind a door. Maya's attention flicked past him down the hallway to the man holding a clipboard, as if he had always been there. Dr. Victor Langford stood with his back half-turned, posture relaxed, head lowered toward blank paper. His suit was tailored, his hair perfect, his expression calm. The kind of calm that made people trust him. Maya saw his right hand at his side. It looked ordinary. Her throat tightened. The scent came from that direction. Not from Ethan, not from the nurse's station. From the space around Langford's palm, as if the air itself had been touched. Maya's heart did not race. Not yet. Her pulse sank into a steady, dangerous quiet. She had felt it before, the moment when your body stops being a body and becomes a decision. Ethan kept walking, eyes fixed toward labor and delivery. He did not see Langford's stillness. He did not see Maya standing frozen beside a cart. He was a man on a mission of a different kind, one that made him open in ways he probably forgot he could be. Langford lifted his head at the right moment. His smile appeared like a light being switched on. Admiral Cole Langford said, voice warm and professional, "I was hoping I'd catch you. Congratulations." Ethan slowed the bouquet shifting in his grip. "Dr. Langford," he replied, polite, grateful. "Thank you. My wife is in room 12. She's in excellent hands," Langford said. He stepped closer just enough to be friendly. "You've been through a lot to get here." Ethan's face softened at that, as if the words hit something tender. "We have," he said quietly. 10 years. Maya watched the distance close. Langford's right hand rose, palm angled outward in the universal gesture of welcome. A handshake, a symbol of respect. A simple, human bridge. Ethan began to mirror it. His own right hand left the bouquet and lifted. Maya's lungs refused air for a beat. The space between their hands was a small gap, a harmless gap, the kind of gap the world crosses 1,000,000 times a day without consequence. Maya saw it as an edge. Her mind ran through options without language, pure motion and math. Shout, too slow. Words travel through air, then through ears, then through disbelief. Grab Ethan's arm, too far. Throw something. The cart was beside her, but the angle was wrong and a thrown object could miss. If Ethan touched Langford's palm skin to skin, the wrong substance could move. Maya did not need a lab to know that. She did not need a sensor. Her body recognized the threat the way an animal recognizes a predator in tall grass. Her feet moved before her thoughts finished forming. Maya launched into a sprint down the corridor. A nurse near the station looked up, startled. Maya. Maya did not answer. The hallway narrowed. Sounds stretched. The beeping of a monitor became a slow drum. The squeak of shoes became a smear. She saw Ethan's fingers extend, relaxed, unaware. She saw Langford's hand steady, offered, waiting. 8 seconds is not a long time. It is enough time to blink, enough time to inhale, enough time to die. Maya ate the distance in strides. Her shoes slapped the tile. Her arms pumped. Her jaw clenched so hard it hurt. Ethan's fingertips were inches away. Langford's smile held. Maya's fist rose not with anger, not with violence for its own sake, but with the same blunt force she had used to shove a teammate back from a contaminated doorway years ago. A physical interruption, immediate and undeniable. Her knuckles connected with Ethan's jaw. The sound was wet and sharp, bone and flesh and shock. Ethan's head snapped to the side. His body staggered. The bouquet flew from his hand and exploded against the floor. Roses scattered petals spinning across the tile like fallen confetti. For a fraction of a second, the hallway went silent from sheer disbelief. Then everything erupted at once. Ethan stumbled back into the wall hand, flying to his face. His eyes went wide, not with pain first, but with confusion so total it looked like fear. "What the hell?" he gasped, voice thick. Maya planted herself between Ethan and Langford, chest-heaving eyes locked on Langford's right hand. "Do not touch him," she shouted, voice raw. "Nobody touch his hand, his right hand." Langford's expression flickered. Shock flashed first quick and involuntary. Then anger tried to cover it like a blanket thrown over something ugly. "Security," Langford snapped. "Get her down. She just assaulted a flag officer." Maya did not look away from Langford. "Do not let him wipe it," she said, and her voice changed, turning colder, more controlled. "Keep his hands visible." A security guard rounded the corner at a run. Another followed. 2 more staff members spilled out of nearby rooms, drawn by the punch and the shout. Someone screamed in the distance, a frightened sound from a labor room, where a woman thought violence had entered a place that was supposed to be safe. Ethan pressed his palm to his jaw, eyes watering. He looked at Maya, then at Langford, trying to assemble meaning from shattered seconds. Maya, a charge nurse, called, voice sharp. "What are you doing?" Maya did not answer her name. She answered the threat. "Hazmat," Maya shouted. "Call Hazmat now." A security guard grabbed Maya's shoulder from behind. Maya twisted away, violent not in intent, but in necessity. "Stop," she barked. "If you touch his right hand, you contaminate yourself." The guard hesitated, thrown off by the certainty in her voice. Langford's right hand dipped slightly toward the side of his suit jacket as if to wipe it casually. Maya saw the motion and lunged forward. "Do not," she shouted. A figure in Navy security attire burst into the hall from the elevator lobby, moving fast, eyes scanning. Another followed. They had the look of men trained to read chaos, trained to identify a principal and a threat. Their eyes landed on Ethan, then on Maya, then on Langford. One of them, a lieutenant with a close-cut haircut, raised his hands. "Sir," he said to Ethan, voice firm, "step back, don't touch anyone." Ethan blinked, stunned. "She hit me," he said, as if stating the only fact he could trust. "I see that," the lieutenant replied. His eyes narrowed at Maya. "Ma'am, hands where I can see them." Maya lifted her hands slowly, palms out, showing she held nothing. Her gaze never left Langford. "Look at his right palm," she said to the lieutenant. "Don't let him smear it, don't let him wash it." Langford's lips curled. "This is absurd," he said, voice rising. "She is unstable. She attacked an Admiral in the maternity wing. Restrain her." 2 security guards surged forward again, emboldened by the CEO's authority. They grabbed Maya's arms. Maya did not fight like a brawler. She fought like someone trying to keep a hazardous container from breaking. She twisted her body to face Langford even as they pulled her back. "Test him," she shouted. "Swab his palm right now." They forced her down. Her knee hit the tile hard. Pain flashed bright, then faded beneath adrenaline. A guard pressed her shoulder, pinning her. Ethan pushed off the wall, still holding his jaw. His eyes were bloodshot with shock. He looked at the scattered roses, then at Maya being forced to the floor, then at Langford standing there, composed again, hands held slightly away from his body. "What is going on?" Ethan demanded, voice rough. "Who are you?" Maya turned her head toward him, face pressed partly against the floor, hair falling across her cheek. Her eyes were fierce. "I'm the nurse who kept you from shaking his hand," she said. "If you touched him, you wouldn't be walking into your wife's room." Ethan stared at her, breath catching. The charge nurse stepped forward, trembling with anger and uncertainty. "Maya, you can't say things like that. You hit him." Maya swallowed and forced her voice steady. "Call Hazmat, lock this corridor. Get patients behind doors." A doctor stepped out of a nearby room, drawn by the shouting. He saw Ethan, recognized him, then saw Langford. "Dr. Langford," he said, confused. "What happened?" Langford turned to him, smooth as oil. "An employee had a breakdown," he said. "She attacked Admiral Cole. We're handling it." Maya let out a sound that was half laugh, half choke. "Don't listen to him," she said. "Don't touch him." The lieutenant from Navy Security moved closer to Langford, eyes on the CEO's hands. "Sir," the lieutenant said, tone respectful but immovable, "please keep your hands visible." Langford's eyes narrowed. "Do you know who I am?" "Yes, sir," the lieutenant replied. "And I know what I'm seeing. You will keep your hands visible." Langford held his right hand slightly away from his jacket, fingers spread just enough to show compliance. His face remained calm, but a muscle in his cheek twitched. From down the hall, the heavy footfalls of a hazmat response team approached. Not many hospitals had a unit like that on call, but Harborview did. Proximity to military facilities brought certain resources. It also brought certain risks. 2 responders in protective gear entered the corridor carrying a hard case of testing equipment. Their masks reflected the overhead lights, turning their faces into mirrors. The hallway quieted. Even the arguing stopped. People watched the hazmat team with the same reverence people have for firefighters entering smoke. A hazmat technician raised a gloved hand. "Clear the area," the technician said. "No one touches anyone until we assess." The charge nurse nodded quickly and began ushering staff back. A security guard moved toward Ethan, then stopped, unsure whether to touch him. Ethan lifted his hands again, palms open, as if showing he understood. "I haven't touched anyone," Ethan said, voice tight. "She hit me before I touched him." The hazmat tech turned toward Maya on the floor. "Ma'am, what did you detect?" Maya's breath came shallow. She forced herself to speak clearly. "Contact-delivered compound," she said. "On his right palm. It's fast. It's lethal." Langford scoffed. "This is insane," he snapped. "You're taking orders from a nurse who assaulted an admiral." The hazmat tech did not look at Langford's face. The tech looked at Langford's hands. "Sir," the technician said, calm and flat, "I need to swab your right palm." Langford took a step back. "Absolutely not." The lieutenant's hand closed around Langford's forearm, firm but controlled. "Sir," the lieutenant said, voice low, "you will comply." Langford jerked his arm, then froze when he realized he could not. His eyes darted toward the corridor exit as if measuring distance. The hazmat tech stepped forward and swabbed Langford's palm with a sterile pad, careful and precise. The pad went into a sealed vial. The tech set it into a portable analyzer and began prepping reagents with movements that were practiced and quick. A second hazmat tech approached Ethan. "Sir," the tech said, "hands." Ethan swallowed and lifted his right hand. The tech swabbed Ethan's palm and fingers, then examined the swab. Maya watched from the floor, jaw tight. If Ethan's swab came back clean, it meant the punch had landed in time. If it did not, it meant the corridor was about to become a different kind of emergency. The analyzer beeped softly as it processed. The corridor filled with tension so thick it felt physical. Nurses stood with hands over their mouths. A resident doctor stared at the machine like it was a judge. One of the security guards who had pinned Maya shifted uncomfortably as if beginning to realize he had restrained the wrong person. Ethan's breathing grew louder. He looked down at Maya, face hard with a new kind of attention. "You're telling me," he said, voice low, "you hit me to stop a handshake." Maya met his gaze. "Yes." "That's your explanation," Ethan said. "That's the truth," Maya replied. Ethan's eyes flicked to Langford. The CEO stood very still, shoulders back, chin lifted. He looked offended. He looked powerful. He looked like a man waiting for his authority to reassert itself. But his right hand trembled slightly, almost imperceptible. Ethan noticed it. The hazmat tech looked up. "Preliminary reading in 10 seconds," the tech announced. A woman's cry rose from behind a closed labor room door, sharp with pain. It reminded everyone what this wing was for. It reminded everyone that life was happening nearby, fragile and urgent, while a different kind of danger sat in the hallway like a loaded device. The charge nurse forced her voice steady. "Clear the corridor," she ordered. "Close doors. Keep patients inside." A staff member hurried away. Another nurse pressed a hand to the wall and breathed as if trying not to faint. The analyzer beeped again. Maya's wrists were pulled behind her as a security guard snapped handcuffs on a reflexive move to restore order. The cold metal bit her skin. She did not protest. She did not fight. Her eyes stayed on the hazmat tech. "Ma'am," the security chief said, leaning down toward her. His voice was quieter now, less confident. "You'd better be right." Maya's voice came out hoarse. "I am." Langford's gaze snapped to Maya. His expression carried hatred so pure it looked like heat. "You," he said softly, and the word held a promise of harm. Maya did not flinch. She stared back, and in her eyes there was something Langford did not expect. Not fear, not pride, just resolve. The hazmat tech lifted the swab from the analyzer and looked at it. For a heartbeat, the tech's face went blank. Then color drained from it. The tech turned the swab slightly under the light as if confirming what the eyes were seeing. The corridor held its breath. "Sir," the hazmat tech said, voice rising to carry, "we have a positive result on the right palm." A collective sound moved through the hallway, a gasp that rippled from one person to the next. It was the sound of a room full of people realizing how close they had been to disaster without knowing it. Ethan's eyes widened. His mouth opened, then closed. His hand drifted toward his jaw again, not because it hurt, but because he suddenly understood the punch as a door slamming shut between him and something final. The hazmat tech continued, voice firm. "Highly toxic, contact-based, unknown synthetic." Langford's face lost its composure. His lips parted. His eyes flashed with something animal. "No," he said, but it sounded thin, like he was trying to deny gravity. The lieutenant tightened his grip on Langford's arm. "Sir," the lieutenant said, voice hard now, "you are not moving." Langford's gaze flicked toward the corridor exit again. His body shifted, weight loading into his legs. Maya watched him with a calm that came from long familiarity with desperate men. They always looked for a gap. They always believed they could outrun consequences. Ethan took a step forward, voice rough. "Dr. Langford," he said. "Why?" Langford's eyes snapped to Ethan. Something cracked open behind them, an old wound exposed to air. "You don't even know," Langford hissed. Another Marine from Ethan's detail moved in, blocking Langford's path without touching him. Two security guards stepped back as if the air around Langford had turned dangerous. The hazmat tech looked at Ethan's swab results and exhaled relief, visible even through the mask. "The Admiral's hands are clean," the tech said. Maya's shoulders sagged for half a second. Relief hit her like sudden exhaustion. She closed her eyes, then opened them again, refusing to let herself collapse while the threat still stood. Ethan's breath shuddered. "You stopped it," he said to Maya, almost disbelieving. Maya's voice was quiet now, stripped of adrenaline. "Yes." The security chief stared at her handcuffs, then at Langford, then at Ethan's bruised jaw. His face shifted from certainty to shame. Langford made a sound like a laugh, but it broke halfway through. "You want to know why?" he said, voice rising. "You want the story." Ethan's gaze stayed locked on him. Langford's chest heaved. His calm persona was falling apart, and beneath it was something raw and ugly and grief-soaked. "Ryan Langford," he spat. "Say that name. Say it like it meant something." Ethan's brow furrowed. The name did not land immediately. Langford's eyes widened with fury. "Of course you don't remember," he said, voice shaking. "You never remember the people you destroy." Ethan's face tightened. "I don't know who that is," he said, and the honesty in it only fed Langford's rage. Langford pulled against the lieutenant's grip. His suit jacket shifted. His right hand twitched, as if it wanted to wipe itself on something, to erase evidence, to regain control. The lieutenant held him still. Langford's voice turned into a shout that echoed down the hallway and rattled the quiet doors. 8 years, he screamed. 8 years of watching my mother forget my name. 8 years of my brother rotting in a cell. 8 years of your life continuing like you were untouched. Ethan's face changed. Something clicked at the edge of his memory, not the name yet, but the shape of a case. "The Eastern Europe operation," Ethan said slowly. Langford's eyes burned. "You led it," he said. "You made it happen. You stood in that courtroom and watched the sentence drop and walked away like it was nothing. Ethan swallowed hard. His gaze flicked to the scattered roses on the floor petals crushed under shoes. He looked back at Langford. That operation was to stop an arms network, he said, voice controlled but strained. People were dying because of it. And my family died anyway, Langford snapped. Maya lay on the floor in handcuffs, watching the pieces of the past slam into the present. She saw Ethan's expression the way a man's face looks when he realizes that duty creates enemies you never see. She saw Langford's unraveling the way grief can curdle into something that demands blood. A nurse stepped out of room 12, eyes wide, phone pressed to her ear. "Sarah Cole is asking for her husband," the nurse said, voice shaking. "She's getting scared." Ethan flinched at the sound of Sarah's name. His body leaned forward instinctively towards the door, toward his wife, toward the life waiting for him. Then he looked at Langford again, as if trapped between two emergencies. Maya's voice cut through low but sharp. "Get him out of this wing," she said, speaking to the charge nurse, to the security chief, to anyone who would listen. "Keep patients away from him. Keep his hands contained." The hazmat tech nodded and reached for another sealed bag. The tech moved with swift professionalism, wrapping a containment cover around Langford's right hand to prevent accidental contact. Langford snarled and tried to jerk away. The lieutenant held him. The corridor filled with the distant sound of approaching sirens muffled through hospital walls. A hospital administrator pushed into the hall, face flushed tie slightly askew. "What happened?" the administrator demanded. "Why is there hazmat in my maternity wing?" The charge nurse spoke quickly, voice trembling. "Possible chemical threat, sir." CEO's palm tested positive. The administrator stared as if the words did not make sense. Then his eyes locked on Langford and his face turned pale. Langford's voice dropped suddenly sharp and venomous. "You think you're righteous," he said to Ethan. "You think you're a hero. You were a hurricane that never looked back." Ethan's jaw clenched. He took a step closer, stopping short of Langford's contained hand. "If you wanted justice," he said, "there are courts." Langford laughed again, and this time it was pure bitterness. "Courts," he spat. "My mother stroked out in a kitchen because of shame. My brother's life was erased. Where was your court for that?" Maya watched Ethan's eyes. The Admiral was trying to stay composed, but shock had cracked him open. Not fear for himself anymore. Fear for the fragile life down the hall. Fear that a man in a suit had brought death into the one place it did not belong. The security chief crouched beside Maya. His hands hovered near her cuffs, uncertain. "Maya," he said quietly, the first time he used her name as if she were human and not a problem. "Tell me how you knew." Maya's throat tightened. She could feel the weight of eyes on her. Nurses, doctors, Marines. The entire wing waiting for an explanation that could make the violence make sense. She spoke in a steady tone, keeping it simple, keeping it useful. "I can smell certain compounds," she said. "I used to do federal chemical response. The scent in this hallway was wrong. It was on him." The security chief swallowed. "Federal," he repeated, as if the word carried authority he could finally understand. The lieutenant glanced at Maya, then lifted his phone. He stepped a few feet away and spoke in low tones to someone on the line, giving name and date of birth. His gaze returned to Maya with new scrutiny. Ethan's eyes stayed on Langford, but his voice shifted when he spoke to Maya, rough with disbelief. "You risked your career," he said. "You risked prison." Maya met his gaze. "I did not have time to ask permission," she replied. Langford's lips curled. "You didn't have time," he mocked, but the mockery was weak now. His breathing was heavy. His eyes kept darting, searching. The lieutenant returned phone, still in hand. His expression had changed, skepticism replaced by something colder. "Sir," the lieutenant said to Ethan, "her background checks out." Ethan blinked. "What?" "Department confirms," the lieutenant said. "Chemical response specialist. Honorable separation. A murmur ran through the hallway. People looked at Maya differently, as if the hospital scrubs were a costume hiding something sharper. The security chief exhaled and reached for Maya's cuffs again, but hesitated. Procedure fought with reality. The hospital administrator stepped closer to Langford, voice shaking. "Victor," he said, and there was disbelief in his tone, as if he could not reconcile the man he hired with the man being restrained. "Is this true?" Langford's eyes snapped to the administrator. "You hired me," he said, voice thick. "You put me in this building and let me watch him walk past for years." The administrator recoiled, horrified. Ethan's voice turned hard. "You accessed my wife's medical information," he said. "You tracked her." Langford's face twisted. "I needed the right night," he said, and the simplicity of it made several nurses flinch. A door opened down the hall and a doctor poked his head out, face tense. "We need the father," the doctor said, scanning. "Room 12 is progressing fast." Ethan's body reacted instantly, leaning toward the voice pulled like gravity. His eyes flicked down the corridor toward Sarah, toward Lily. Then he looked back at Maya, the woman on the floor whose punch had kept him alive in this hallway. His voice dropped. "Are my hands clean?" he asked, as if needing to hear it again. The hazmat tech nodded. "No transfer," the tech replied. Ethan's breath released in a shaky exhale. Langford saw the exchange and made a sound of pure frustration. "He gets everything," he snarled. "He gets to walk into that room like he deserves it." Ethan's eyes flashed. "Deserve has nothing to do with it," he said, and his voice broke slightly on the last word. The sirens outside grew louder. Footsteps pounded near the elevator lobby as hospital security reinforced the corridor. A pair of uniformed officers entered, guided by staff faces set. The lieutenant tightened his grip. "Sir," he said to Langford, "you are in custody." Langford's breathing turned ragged. His eyes locked on Ethan, again hatred and grief swirling together. "You never even knew my name," he said, voice shaking. Ethan's brow furrowed, then he shook his head slowly. "I did my job," he said. "I made decisions. I carry them. But I didn't know you." Langford's mouth opened then shut, as if the words he wanted were too sharp to fit through his teeth. Maya lay still, letting the scene settle into containment. The immediate danger had been identified. The hallway had shifted from confusion to procedure. Hazmat protocols, custody, isolation, and yet the maternity wing still pulsed with life behind closed doors, contractions rising and falling like waves. Maya could hear a woman crying softly down the hall, perhaps afraid, perhaps in pain, perhaps both. The sounds threaded through the corridor and reminded Maya why she had left her old work. She wanted to be in rooms where people survived. The security chief finally unlocked Maya's handcuffs with trembling hands. The metal fell away from her wrists with a soft clink that sounded too small for what had happened. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. Maya pushed herself up slowly, knees aching, palms stinging where the tile had scraped. She looked at Ethan. His jaw was swelling, already red and bruised. His eyes were still wide, not just with shock, but with something like gratitude he did not know how to express yet. Maya's voice was low. "Go," she said to him. "Your wife is waiting." Ethan hesitated, torn by duty and instinct. The lieutenant read his face and nodded toward the corridor. "We've got him," the lieutenant said. "Go to your family." Ethan looked at Langford one last time, as if trying to understand how a hospital hallway could turn into a battlefield. Then he bent and picked up one rose from the floor. Its petals were bruised. Its stem was bent. He held it gently, as if refusing to let the moment become only violence. Then he turned and walked quickly down the hall toward room 12, rose in hand, breath unsteady. Maya watched him go, the sound of his footsteps fading into the rhythm of the maternity wing. Behind her, Langford stood, restrained. His right hand contained his face, hollowing, as the reality around him tightened into chains and evidence. The administrator stared at him as if seeing a stranger. The nurses watched with shaken eyes. The hazmat tech sealed vials and labeled them with careful handwriting. The corridor smelled of sanitizer and crushed roses. Maya flexed her fingers once, feeling the ache in her knuckles. She looked down at her hands that had spent the evening adjusting IV lines and soothing frightened mother's hands that had turned into a weapon for 8 seconds. The hazmat tech held up the test strip again, confirming the reading with a second device. The tech's voice carried through the corridor, steady and official. "Positive," confirmed the tech said. Maya closed her eyes for a brief moment, and when she opened them, her gaze was clear. Maya closed her eyes for a brief moment, and when she opened them, her gaze was clear. The corridor had changed shape. Not physically, but in the way people held their bodies. Nurses stayed close to doorways, now hands braced on frames as if the building might tilt. Security formed a loose perimeter, not touching anyone unless they had to. The hazmat team moved with deliberate care, sealing swabs and labeled vials, wiping down surfaces where shoes had crushed rose petals into the tile. Dr. Victor Langford stood with his right hand enclosed in a containment cover, his wrist held by the Navy lieutenant like a tether. The CEO badge on his jacket caught the light every time he shifted, a small gleam that felt obscene in a hallway that still echoed with the punch. A uniformed police officer arrived first, then another, then a supervisor with a radio pressed to his shoulder. Their eyes swept the scene, taking in the Admiral's bruised face, the scattered flowers, the hazmat masks, the contained hand. The hospital administrator tried to speak, but his words kept catching. He looked at Langford as if waiting for the man to explain it away with a press conference tone. Langford did not offer comfort. He stared down the hallway toward the labor rooms, jaw clenched, breathing through his nose like he was forcing himself not to lunge. Maya stepped back toward the nurse's station, wrist sore where the cuffs had been. A charge nurse touched her elbow lightly. "Maya," she said, voice trembling. "Are you hurt?" Maya shook her head once. Her eyes tracked the containment cover on Langford's hand. "Keep people away from him," Maya said quietly, even now. The charge nurse nodded, swallowing hard, then turned to bark instructions into the wing with the steadiness she had to manufacture. Doors closed. Curtains were pulled. Staff spoke in calm tones that did not match their faces. At the far end of the hallway, Ethan Cole's footsteps faded as he moved toward room 12 with a single bruised rose in his hand. The door to the labor corridor opened for him, then shut again, sealing the danger behind him and the danger ahead of him into separate worlds. Inside room 12, the air was warmer, heavy with the smell of sweat and antiseptic. Sarah lay angled on the bed, hair stuck to her forehead, lips dry, eyes searching the doorway, as if she could pull Ethan into existence through sheer will. The moment Ethan stepped in, her face shifted, relief and fury tangled together so tightly it looked like pain. "You made it," she said, voice cracked. Ethan crossed the room in 2 steps. He took her hand, careful not to squeeze too hard, as if she might shatter. His jaw was swelling, the bruise already blooming, but he leaned down anyway and pressed his forehead to hers. "I'm here," he whispered. Sarah's eyes flicked to his face. "What happened to you?" Ethan swallowed. He did not want to bring the hallway into this room, but Sarah had always known when he was holding something back. She read him the way she read weather. "There was an incident," he said softly. "I'm okay. You're okay. Lily's okay." Sarah gripped his hand. "Don't lie to me," she said, and her voice was thin with effort. Another contraction built and her face tightened. "Stay. Don't move." "I'm not going anywhere," Ethan said. A nurse entered with a quick, practiced smile that did not reach her eyes. She checked the monitors, checked Sarah's vitals, and glanced at Ethan. "Admiral Cole," she said, then corrected herself as if the title suddenly felt wrong in this room. "Sir, we're making progress, but we're watching her blood pressure." Ethan nodded once. He kept his eyes on Sarah. He wiped a damp strand of hair off her forehead with his thumb, a small gesture that made her breath hitch. Sarah's fingers dug into his. "I hate that you scare me," she whispered. Ethan's throat tightened. He bent and kissed her knuckles. "I know," he said. Minutes passed in the strange stretch of labor time where seconds can feel like hours, and hours can vanish. The fetal monitor kept its steady rhythm until it did not. A sharp change. A faster beep that made the nurse's posture snap into alert. The nurse glanced at the screen, then at Sarah. "I need the doctor," she called, voice controlled but urgent. A physician entered, followed by another nurse. They spoke in low tones, words that carried weight even when you could not catch them all. Oxygen, heart rate, pressure. Sarah's eyes widened. "What's happening?" she asked. Ethan stood still, holding her hand. "Talk to me," he said to the doctor, voice firm. The doctor met his gaze. "We're seeing signs of distress," she said. "We may need to move quickly." Sarah's breathing turned shallow. "No," she whispered, fear in the word. Ethan leaned close to her face. "Hey," he said. "Look at me. You are not alone." Sarah's eyes locked on his. Another wave of pain hit. She cried out, then squeezed his hand so hard his fingers numbed. The doctor spoke again, decisive now. "We're calling it emergency cesarean." The room shifted into motion. Nurses moved to disconnect monitors to prepare transport. A tray rolled in. A cart appeared. Sarah's eyes flicked around, panic rising. Ethan kept his voice low and steady. "I'm with you," he said. "I'm right here." Sarah shook her head, tears pooling. "I can't," she whispered. "Yes, you can," Ethan said. He did not say it like a slogan. He said it like an order he wished he could take for her. "You're already doing it." They wheeled her out, Ethan walking beside the bed, one hand still holding hers until the hallway demanded separation. At the operating room doors, a nurse stopped him. "Sir, you need to gown up," she said, and she glanced at his jaw. "Are you okay?" Ethan nodded. "I'm not leaving," he said. The nurse handed him a cap, a mask, a sterile gown. Ethan pulled them on, with clumsy hands, adrenaline making his fingers feel too big. He stared through the small window in the door at Sarah on the table, her face tense, her eyes searching for him. He pressed his palm to the glass for a second, then stepped inside when they allowed it. He took a seat near her head, where he could speak to her, where he could be the anchor she needed. "I'm here," he said again, close to her ear. Sarah's eyes closed for a heartbeat. A tear slipped out and vanished into her hairline. While the operating room filled with bright light and steady commands, the fourth-floor corridor outside labor and delivery tightened into a different kind of discipline. A hospital is trained for emergencies, but this one had the flavor of something unfamiliar, something that made even experienced staff feel like the ground had shifted. Two men in plain clothes arrived with badges that changed how everyone stood. Federal agents. They moved through the hall with quiet authority, speaking to the police supervisor, then to the hazmat lead, then to the hospital administrator. Their eyes were not wide. They had seen strange scenes before. What they did not like was the location of this one. An agent approached Langford. "Dr. Victor Langford," he said, voice flat. "You are being detained pending investigation." Langford lifted his chin. On what grounds he demanded, but his voice lacked the smoothness it had earlier. The agent looked at the containment cover. "Possession of a toxic substance in a clinical environment," he said. "Attempted harm to a protected official. We'll decide the rest after we see your office." Langford's eyes flicked, calculating. "You can't just walk into my office." The agent's gaze did not change. "Watch me." They moved Langford toward the elevators with a protective bubble around his right hand. Nurses pressed against walls to make room. Someone made the sign of the cross. Someone else whispered, "My God," as if saying it could keep the building from remembering. Maya was escorted not as a suspect now, but as a witness. An agent approached her holding a small notebook. "Name," he said. "Maya Hart," she replied. "You identified the compound by smell?" the agent said, not a question. Maya nodded. "I recognized the carrier profile," she said, choosing words that were true without turning into a lecture. "It wasn't normal hospital chemistry." "You have training," the agent said. "Yes," Maya replied, where he asked. Maya hesitated just long enough to show the weight of the answer. "Federal Chemical Response," she said. "I separated from service years ago. The agent looked at her wrists, still reddened from cuffs. "We'll need a full statement," he said. Maya met his gaze. "I'll give it," she said. "After you secure the building." The agent nodded once. He respected the clarity in her voice, the way she spoke like someone who had stood in hazardous places and learned how to keep language clean. Upstairs, Langford's executive office opened under the pressure of law and suspicion. A keycard. A passcode. A quick override by hospital security under orders they could not refuse. The door swung inward, and the agents stepped into a space designed to reassure donors. Leather chairs. Soft lighting. Framed awards. A small sculpture on the credenza that looked like an abstract heart. Then one agent walked to the desk and opened the top drawer. He froze. "Get over here," he called to his partner, voice low. Inside the drawer lay a leather-bound journal, thick with pages, the kind of book people use when they want their thoughts to feel permanent. The agent opened it. Handwriting filled the first page in tight, precise lines. Dates. Times. Notes that did not belong to hospital operations. A name appeared again and again. Ethan Cole. The agent flipped forward. Photographs slipped out glossy and printed. Ethan leaving the naval base. Sarah entering a medical building. Ethan at a charity event. A photo of the hospital corridor itself taken from an angle that made it look like a stage. The agent's jaw tightened. "This is surveillance," he murmured. Another agent opened a cabinet near the bookshelf. It held what it was supposed to hold at first glance. Files, policies, a framed letter of thanks. Then the agent pressed a hand against the back panel and felt it shift. A false wall, a hidden compartment. When it opened, the office stopped being an office. Glassware, measuring equipment, vials, reagents sealed in packets. A small portable hood folded down like a secret altar. Nothing that belonged near maternity patients. Nothing that belonged inside a hospital CEO's suite. One agent stared at the setup voice, thick with disbelief. "He built a lab in here," he said. A computer forensics specialist arrived with gloves and a case. They imaged Langford's laptop and pulled logs, messages, and transactions. A screen filled with lines of data. Emails with encrypted attachments. Digital wallets. Payments routed through layers that still left a trail if you knew where to look. A list of purchases appeared. Specialty compounds. Lab equipment. Protective materials. Shipments sent to addresses that did not match hospital supply chains. A forensic analyst turned the screen slightly toward the lead agent. "He used hospital funds," she said. "Small transfers, spread out." The lead agent's eyes hardened. "He stole from patients to finance this," he said. They kept digging opening cabinets, checking vents, searching behind framed photographs. One agent removed a painting and found a sheet of paper taped to the wall beneath it. A timeline. Clean blocks of writing. Dates circled. Notes about shift changes and hallway traffic. It looked like a military plan drawn by a man who wanted to feel like a commander. Another cabinet held 3 folders. Not medical files. Not donor files. Personal profiles printed and assembled with disturbing care. Names, photos, schedules, address history, notes about habits and routines. The lead agent stared at the folders for a long moment. He did not speak right away. He simply laid them on the desk beside the journal and looked at the names as if trying to decide whether to feel angry or cold. He chose cold. Back on the 4th floor, Maya sat in a small conference room with a plastic cup of water she had not touched. Her scrubs were streaked with dust from the tile. Her knee throbbed. The soreness in her knuckles began to bloom now that the adrenaline had faded. An agent sat across from her, pen poised. The hospital administrator stood near the door, arms crossed, face still pale. A nurse advocate sat beside Maya, watching the room with protective attention. "Walk me through the hallway," the agent said. Maya took a slow breath. "I smelled it before I saw him," she said. "I felt the pattern in the air. Metallic. Sweet. It concentrated as I moved down the corridor. When I saw Dr. Langford extend his hand, I knew the delivery method. "You knew it was on his palm," the agent said. "Yes," Maya replied. "And I knew there wasn't time." The administrator swallowed. "You hit an admiral," he said, voice strained as if the sentence still did not fit inside his mouth. Maya looked at him. "I hit a man who was about to touch poison," she said. The room fell quiet. The agent's pen moved across paper. Outside, the night deepened. Shift change came and went in a blur of new faces and old fear. Rumors moved through the hospital like a second kind of air, a chemical threat, a CEO, a nurse who punched an admiral. People whispered the details with the hunger of shock, then shuddered when they remembered where they were. Near midnight, Ethan finally stepped out of the operating room corridor, face drawn, eyes red. His jaw was swollen, the bruise darkening. A nurse spoke to him quietly, then guided him toward a room with a bassinet. Sarah lay in recovery, exhausted, pale, but alive. Her eyes opened when Ethan entered. She looked at his face, then at his hands, then past him toward the bassinet. Ethan moved closer, voice low. "She's here," he said. Sarah's lips trembled. "Lily," she whispered. Ethan nodded. He lifted the tiny bundle with hands that were suddenly unsure, hands that had held steering wheels and signed orders and carried weight. Lily's face was small and scrunched skin soft and new. Her mouth opened in a quiet yawn that looked like a question. Ethan's breath caught. He stared as if he could memorize her in one glance. Sarah reached for them, fingers trembling. Ethan lowered Lily toward her, and Sarah touched the baby's cheek with the gentlest motion, like she was afraid of waking a miracle. "I thought you weren't going to make it," Sarah whispered. Ethan swallowed hard. He glanced at his bruised jaw, then shook his head slightly. "I did," he said. "I'm here." Sarah looked at him for a long moment, and in that look were 10 years, 3 losses, and a lifetime of waiting for him to choose this room over everything else. Ethan leaned down and kissed Sarah's forehead. Then he looked at Lily again and felt his chest tighten in a way he did not have a name for. Hours later, when the hospital had quieted into that late-night stillness, where even machines sound softer, Maya sat alone in the break room with a cup of coffee that had gone cold. The room smelled of microwaved food and disinfectant. A fluorescent light flickered faintly. Maya stared at her hands again, flexing her fingers, feeling the ache like a verdict. A knock sounded at the door. Maya looked up. Ethan Cole stepped in still in hospital-issued scrubs over his uniform. His jaw was visibly bruised. His eyes were tired in a way rank could not hide. Maya stood immediately. "Sir," she said. Ethan raised a hand gently. "Don't," he said. His voice was quiet. "Sit." Maya hesitated, then sat. Ethan took the chair across from her, moving carefully as if his body was finally beginning to feel everything at once. For a few seconds, neither of them spoke. The silence was not awkward. It was heavy. Ethan's gaze dropped to Maya's knuckles. "That's going to bruise," he said. Maya looked down at her hand, then back up. "So will your jaw," she replied. Ethan's mouth twitched into something that almost resembled a smile. It faded quickly. "You saved my life," he said. Maya's throat tightened. "I stopped a contact event," she replied, using clinical language because emotion felt too sharp. Ethan leaned forward slightly. "You hit me," he said, not accusing, just naming the reality. "You chose to look insane in a hallway full of people. You chose to take the blame in the moment." Maya's eyes stung. She blinked slowly. "I didn't have time to be understood," she said. Ethan nodded once, like that sentence landed in a familiar place. "Sarah had complications," he said quietly. "They moved fast. If I wasn't there—" He stopped, breath catching. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. He turned the screen toward Maya. A photo of Lily's swaddled eyes closed a tiny fist near her cheek. Maya stared at the photo. Her chest tightened, and for a moment she could not speak. "That's her," Ethan said. "Lily Grace." Maya's voice came out rough. "She's beautiful," she said. Ethan swallowed. "I almost didn't meet her," he said. Maya looked at him, and the image of the hallway flashed through her mind again. Langford's palm. Ethan's hand moving forward. The 8 seconds that had felt like a lifetime. "I'm sorry," Maya said quietly, and she meant it for the punch and the chaos and the fear she had thrown into his night. Ethan shook his head. "Don't apologize," he said. "Not to me." Maya's eyes dropped. "I left my old work because I was tired of death," she said, voice low. "Tonight felt like it followed me into a place that's supposed to be safe." Ethan's gaze stayed on her. "You did what you were trained to do," he said, "and you did it in a place that needed it." A soft knock sounded again. A hospital administrator stepped into the room accompanied by a woman in a blazer with a legal pad. The administrator's face was controlled now, but his eyes still carried shock. "Ms. Hart," the administrator said, "we need to speak with you in the morning." Maya's stomach tightened. "Am I being suspended?" she asked. The administrator glanced at Ethan, then back at Maya. "You prevented a catastrophe," he said. "There are processes we have to follow, but you will be heard." Ethan's voice cut in calm but authoritative. "She will not be treated like a criminal for preventing murder," he said. The woman with the legal pad nodded slightly, making a note. Maya watched Ethan, surprised by the steadiness of his defense by the way his presence seemed to rearrange the room. The administrator cleared his throat. "We'll meet at 9, he said. "Conference room B." Maya nodded throat tight. "Yes, sir," she said. The administrator left. The door clicked shut. The break room fell quiet again. Ethan stood slowly. "Get some rest," he said. Maya let out a small, bitter sound. "I don't think sleep is on the schedule," she replied. Ethan looked at her for a long moment, then extended his left-hand palm open, careful. Maya glanced at it, then at his bruised jaw, then stood and shook his hand with a gentleness that made the gesture feel new. "Thank you," Ethan said. Maya's voice was barely above a whisper. "Go be with them," she said. Ethan nodded once and left the break room footsteps quiet. Morning came with hard light and the smell of burnt coffee in the hallway. Maya arrived early to the conference room wearing borrowed professional clothes that did not feel like her skin. She sat with her hands clasped tight on the table, trying to keep them from shaking. The hospital board filed in with measured expressions, lawyers, administrators, a security consultant with a rigid posture. The board chair, a gray-haired woman with eyes that missed nothing, sat at the head of the table and opened a folder. "Maya Hart," she began, voice even. "Last night you struck a United States Navy Admiral on hospital property." Maya's chest tightened. She kept her gaze steady. "Yes," she said. The board chair held the silence for a beat, letting it sit. Then she flipped a page. "You also prevented an attempted killing using a toxic contact agent." The chair continued. "You triggered appropriate escalation. You exposed systemic vulnerabilities in our facility." Maya blinked, surprised by the directness. A lawyer leaned forward slightly. "There will be an investigation," he said. "There will be documentation. But law enforcement has indicated that your actions fall under defense of others." Maya's breath released slowly, controlled. The board chair slid a document across the table. "We are creating a new role," she said. "Director of Clinical Threat Safety." Maya stared at the paper. The words looked unreal. The chair continued. "You will oversee training and response protocols. You will have authority to halt access to restricted areas when safety is in question. You will coordinate with security hazmat and local agencies." Maya's voice came out soft. "You want me to do this here?" she said. A board member nodded. "We never want a threat like last night inside these walls again," he said. "We also recognize that hospitals are built on openness. We need competence, not fear." Another board member spoke, eyes flicking toward Ethan as he entered the room quietly and took a seat near the wall. "This proposal is supported by Admiral Cole," she said. Maya turned her head. Ethan met her gaze, face still bruised, posture steady. The board chair continued. He has committed personal funding toward the initial implementation. A lawyer added reading from a memo. A grant of $500,000. Maya's throat tightened. She looked at Ethan again. Ethan gave a small nod, as if to say it was settled. The board chair folded her hands. "We are not asking you to forget what happened in that hallway," she said. "We are asking you to build something that makes it less likely to happen again." Maya looked down at her hands, at the faint bruising on her knuckles, at the ink lines of the document. She thought of Sarah's face in room 12 the way she had asked where Ethan was. She thought of the scent in the corridor, the wrongness that had returned like an old ghost. She lifted her gaze. "I'll accept," she said. The board chair's eyes sharpened. Under what conditions, she asked. Maya's voice steadied. "Training is not just for security," she said. "Nurses see everything, doctors see everything, housekeeping sees everything, maintenance sees everything. I want all staff invited. I want reporting channels that don't punish people for being cautious." The board chair held Maya's gaze, then nodded once. "Agreed," she said. Maya signed the document with a pen that felt too light for what it represented. When the meeting ended, Maya stepped out into the hallway and paused. The hospital sounded normal again. Carts rolling. Voices low. A monitor beeping somewhere behind a closed door. Yet the air carried a new awareness, as if everyone had learned that danger could wear a suit and a smile. Ethan approached her quietly. He held his phone again, and this time he did not need to offer words. He simply showed her Lily's face, new light in the screen. Maya looked at the photo, then at Ethan. "Thank you," Ethan said, and his voice was simple. Maya nodded once, feeling the soreness in her knuckles and the steadiness in her chest. She turned and walked toward the maternity wing, not to chase danger, but to stand closer to the place where life began. Maya turned and walked toward the maternity wing, not rushing, not lingering, letting her breathing match the steady pulse of the building. The corridor looked the same as it always had. The same posters, the same waxed floors, the same soft beeping behind doors. Only now she noticed how many hands touched how many surfaces without thinking, how many smiles were granted automatically, how many people moved through the place believing that danger belonged outside the hospital. A week later, the federal courthouse downtown smelled like marble dust and old air conditioning. The halls were bright and cold, designed to keep emotions from taking up space. Maya sat on a wooden bench near a courtroom door, hands folded in her lap, wearing a simple blouse that felt too thin for the weight in her chest. Ethan sat several feet away with Sarah beside him, their newborn sleeping in a carrier wrapped in a soft blanket. Sarah looked tired in a way no makeup could hide, but her eyes stayed sharp, tracking every movement around them. Ethan's jaw still showed faint bruising, a shadow that made strangers look twice and then look away. A bailiff opened the courtroom door and called a name: Victor Langford. Langford entered in an orange jumpsuit, wrists restrained, ankles chained. The suit did not fit his body the way his tailored jackets had. His hair was shorter now, not styled, just cut. His face looked hollowed, as if the anger that once kept him upright had started eating from the inside. He glanced toward the benches, and when his eyes landed on Ethan, a flicker passed through him. Not triumph, not even hatred. Something tired and bitter that could not decide what shape it wanted to be. The judge took the bench. The room rose, then sat. The prosecutor stood and read the charges with a steady cadence that left no room for drama, which made the words hit harder. Attempted murder of a federal official. Possession of an illegal toxic agent in a clinical setting. Fraud. Embezzlement of hospital funds. Conspiracy related to additional planned acts. Langford listened without reacting. His hands stayed still in front of him, restrained, and contained not by hazmat now, but by the law. When the judge asked how he pleaded, Langford's attorney shifted, preparing a statement. Langford spoke first. "Guilty," he said. A sound moved through the room, not loud, but immediate. A collective intake of breath. A chair creaked. Somewhere behind Maya, someone whispered a prayer under their breath and did not realize they did it. The attorney turned sharply. "Victor," he hissed, too quiet for the gallery to hear. Langford did not look at him. He stared forward, eyes fixed on a spot above the judge's head, as if he was reading something written on the wall. The judge's gaze narrowed. "You understand what you are doing?" Langford's mouth tightened. "I understand," he replied. Maya sat very still. The courtroom was silent enough that she could hear Lily's soft breath in the carrier across the aisle. The baby made a tiny sound in her sleep, a small sigh that felt out of place in a room built for consequences. The judge set a date for sentencing. The bailiff called for order. The hearing ended with the efficiency of a machine. Outside the courtroom, the hallway filled with reporters who had caught the scent of the story the same way Maya had caught the scent of danger. Cameras appeared, microphones, people calling questions like darts. "Admiral Cole, did you know the CEO personally?" Maya, "Were you really trained for chemical threats?" Sarah, "How do you feel holding your baby after what happened?" Ethan stepped in front of Sarah, instinctively shielding her with his body the way he had shielded sailors on decks during storms. A federal agent guided them toward a side exit. Maya walked behind them, head down, ignoring the questions. She focused on the sound of Lily's breathing, the steady, ordinary proof of why all of it mattered without anyone needing to say it. Over the next month, federal investigators moved through Harborview Medical Center like a second staff. They spoke to accountants and security supervisors. They subpoenaed records. They replayed camera footage frame by frame until even the air in the hallway seemed cataloged. The clerk who had sent Langford the text was interviewed in a small room with no windows. He cried quickly the way people do when they want to be seen as weak instead of guilty. He admitted to taking money. He insisted he never knew what it was for. The investigators did not argue. They wrote it down. They pulled Langford's hiring file and found pieces that did not fit, dates that overlapped when they should not, references that could not be verified, a background check that looked thorough until you realized which questions were not asked. A week after the arraignment, 3 members of the hospital board resigned in a single morning. Their resignation letters were brief and carefully worded, which made them sound like lies. One of them was later escorted out of a building by agents while staff stared at their shoes to avoid being seen watching. The hospital administrator who had once called Langford a friend began arriving to work early and leaving late, trying to keep the building from collapsing under its own shame. He avoided Maya's eyes in hallways not because he blamed her, but because he did not know how to stand in front of the person who had revealed what he failed to see. Maya did not chase apologies. She took the office the board gave her and began filling it with practical things. Training binders, incident forms, a whiteboard covered in flowcharts written in neat block letters, phones and contact lists, names of people who answered quickly when called. Her title was printed on a small placard outside the door, Director of Clinical Threat Safety. The first day she walked into the training room, 40 staff members sat in folding chairs, faces guarded. Nurses, doctors, security officers, a janitor in a navy blue uniform who looked like he was there because someone told him to be. A maintenance technician with grease under his fingernails. People who had spent their careers believing threats belonged in other places. Maya stood at the front of the room and waited until the whispering stopped. She did not begin with slogans. She began with a simple exercise. She asked them to close their eyes and listen to the room for 10 seconds. Chairs shifting, a cough, the hum of lights, a phone vibrating somewhere on silent, someone's shoe tapping nervously. "Open your eyes," she said. They did. "Most of what keeps patients safe is not equipment," Maya continued, voice calm. "It is attention." A young nurse raised her hand, skeptical. "You want us to act like security." Maya met her gaze. "I want you to act like staff who notice," she replied. "Security sees entrances, you see hallways, you see hands, you see what people carry, how they move, what they avoid." The janitor shifted in his chair. "We are supposed to stop people." Maya shook her head once. "You are supposed to report what makes you pause," she said. "You are supposed to trust that pause enough to speak up." She walked them through scenarios without theatrics. A visitor who will not say who they are here to see. A person who avoids cameras. Someone who asks questions that do not match their stated purpose. Someone who lingers where they do not need to linger. She taught them how to create distance without escalating, how to call for help without panic, how to keep patients calm while the staff does the work. When someone asked about the night in the maternity wing, Maya did not tell the story for entertainment. She described the steps and the response. She described containment. She described how quickly hospitals can become vulnerable when people assume a smile equals safety. No one clapped, no one needed to. The room left quieter than it had arrived, not frightened, just awake. The sentencing hearing took place 6 weeks later. The courtroom was full. Not just reporters this time, but staff from Harborview who came to see the end of a chapter they could not stop thinking about. Maya sat in the witness area, hands folded, posture straight. Ethan sat with Sarah Lily, now older and heavier. Her face turned toward Sarah's chest as she slept. Sarah's hand rested on the baby's back in a slow protective motion. Langford was brought in again, restrained. He looked thinner. His eyes were ringed with exhaustion. He did not glance around the room with the old arrogance of a man used to authority. He moved like someone who had discovered that control is temporary. The judge listened as the prosecutor presented evidence. The journal was introduced. The photographs. The concealed equipment found in the office. Financial records showing diverted hospital funds. Messages and purchase trails that tied intent to preparation. Maya was called to testify. She walked to the stand, raised her right hand, and swore to tell the truth. Her voice stayed steady as she described the corridor. The scent. The hand extended. The seconds collapsing. The decision. The defense attorney tried to press her. "You are telling us you assaulted an admiral based on a smell." Maya looked at him, then at the judge. "I acted based on the totality of what I detected," she replied. And the field test confirmed the presence of a toxic compound on Dr. Langford's palm. The attorney's jaw tightened. "You could have shouted." Maya's gaze did not waver. "A handshake happens faster than belief," she said. There was a murmur in the gallery, quickly silenced by the bailiff. Ethan testified after her. He did not speak like a man delivering a speech. He spoke like a man who had watched his life tilt on a hinge. "I have served in environments where danger is expected," he said. "I did not expect it in a maternity corridor." He paused, throat tightening, and looked at Sarah and Lily. His eyes softened for half a second, then he forced himself back to the courtroom. "He was not trying to hurt me alone," Ethan continued. "He was trying to remove me from my family at the moment they needed me most." Sarah's mouth tightened. Her hand pressed more firmly against Lily's back. When Langford was given the opportunity to speak, he stood slowly. His chains made a soft sound against the floor that cut through the silence. "I do not ask for mercy," he said. His voice was quieter than it had been in the hallway at Harborview. Not because he had become gentle, because the room did not let him perform. "I planned it," Langford continued. "I wanted him to suffer. I wanted his wife to suffer. I wanted my pain to have a place to go." His gaze shifted toward Ethan. "I thought it would make me feel like the world had balance," he said. It did not. He swallowed hard, and for a moment he looked like a man who had finally reached the end of the story he told himself. The judge delivered the sentence with a measured tone. Years that stacked. Restrictions. Conditions. The words sounded clinical, but the weight behind them was final. As Langford was led away, he looked at Ethan one last time. His face did not hold hatred now. It held emptiness like a room after a fire. The courthouse steps outside were crowded. Reporters pushed close. Cameras clicked. Ethan declined to speak. Sarah kept her gaze forward and held Lily close. Maya walked beside them, feeling the sunlight on her skin and the strange quiet inside her chest. Back at Harborview, change did not arrive as a single dramatic moment. It arrived as small adjustments that accumulated until the building felt different. Security began greeting people with a steadiness that did not feel hostile. Staff learned the new reporting channel and used it without shame. Departments practiced response drills that did not end in panic, because they were designed by someone who understood that hospitals cannot become fortresses without losing what they are meant to be. Maya moved through the halls with a tablet in her hand, reviewing notes, checking in with unit managers, listening more than she talked. She stopped to speak with housekeeping staff, asking what they noticed in stairwells and supply closets. She met with nurses at shift change, asking where they felt blind spots were. She spoke with the pharmacy director about access points. She walked the maternity wing again and again, not to relive the night, but to understand the space as it truly was. One afternoon, a nurse from pediatrics flagged a man lingering near the family waiting area. He was not doing anything illegal. He was not shouting. He was simply standing too long without purpose, eyes tracking doors instead of signage. The nurse reported it. Security approached. The man left quickly. Later, police confirmed he had an active restraining order related to a patient's family. On another day, a maintenance worker noticed a propped door leading into a restricted corridor, something small and easy to ignore. He reported it. The door was secured. The incident was traced to a vendor who had been trying to take shortcuts. The vendor lost access. The corridor stayed controlled. None of these moments made headlines. They were not cinematic. They were not the kind of stories people share at dinner. They were simply the building doing what it was supposed to do. At home, Ethan's life began to shift in quieter ways. He started leaving the base earlier. He began saying no to meetings he would have accepted without thought before. He learned the shape of his daughter's daily changes the way he used to learn the shape of a coastline. Lily's cries started to sound different. Her grip grew stronger. Her eyes tracked faces now curious and serious. One evening, Ethan sat on the living room floor while Lily lay on a blanket beside him. Sarah watched from the couch, her hair loose, her face soft with exhaustion, and something close to peace. Ethan held a small stuffed animal in front of Lily and made it wobble. Lily stared, then reached fingers clumsy, then closed her fist around the fabric with sudden determination. Ethan laughed, surprised by how pure the sound was. Sarah smiled. "You missed a lot of laughs like that," Sarah said quietly. Ethan looked up at her. The bruise on his jaw was gone now, but the memory of the hallway still lived behind his eyes. "I know," he replied. Sarah did not press him. She did not need to. She simply watched him sit there on the floor like a man learning how to be present, not as an idea, but as a daily practice. Maya visited once, then again. The first time, she stood at the doorway holding a small gift bag, unsure whether she belonged in a family space. Sarah opened the door and stared at her for a long second, then stepped aside. "Come in," Sarah said. Maya entered, hearing Lily's soft sounds from the living room. Ethan stood careful not to look too formal in his own house. Sarah took the gift bag from Maya's hands and set it on the counter without looking inside. Then she reached out and took Maya's hands, gently turning them palm up. She examined the faint marks on Maya's knuckles, as if she could read the night in them. "You did not owe us anything," Sarah said. Maya's throat tightened. "I was on shift," she replied, voice low. Sarah's eyes held hers. "You were more than that," she said. Lily made a small noise from the blanket, and Maya's gaze dropped instinctively. Ethan lifted Lily into his arms and carried her closer. Lily's eyes were open now, dark and watchful. Ethan looked at Maya. "She knows your voice," he said quietly. Maya blinked. "I have not said much around her." Ethan's mouth softened. "She heard you that night," he replied. Maya stepped closer, slow and cautious. She did not reach for Lily. She simply let the baby look at her. Lily's gaze held, then drifted, then returned as if assessing. Sarah exhaled. "She is stubborn," she said. Ethan nodded, like her mother. Sarah rolled her eyes, but her smile stayed. Maya stood there in the warm light of their living room, hearing the quiet sounds of ordinary life, and felt the strange sensation of being inside the outcome instead of outside the aftermath. Later, when she left, Ethan walked her to the door. "You are building something at the hospital," he said. Maya looked down at her hands, then back up. "I'm trying," she replied. Ethan nodded once. "If you need anything," he said, then stopped searching for the right words. "If you need weight moved, doors opened, people convinced." Maya understood what he was offering. Influence, reach, the kind of support that makes systems change. "I'll tell you," she said. Ethan opened the door. The evening air carried the faint scent of the ocean. Maya stepped onto the porch, then turned back. Ethan's gaze was steady. Not the gaze of an admiral now. The gaze of a father who had learned that survival is sometimes delivered by a person no one expects. Maya nodded once and walked away, her footsteps fading into the quiet street. At Harborview, the maternity wing continued its work every night. Babies arrived, mothers cried, fathers paced. Nurses adjusted IVs and guided breathing and whispered reassurance into frightened ears. The monitors kept beeping. The carts kept rolling. The posters stayed on the walls. The difference was that now, when something felt off, people spoke up. And in Maya's office, a small, framed photo sat beside her training binders. Lily Grace Cole, swaddled eyes closed, fist tucked near her cheek. Not as a trophy, not as a reminder of violence, as proof of a night that ended with a heartbeat still in the room.